Hello and welcome to another episode of Simply Latin. In the last episode, we spoke about the Latin language. We introduced ourselves to the Latin language and got to know about the cases, especially with regard to what they communicate to us in its various aspects. At the same time, we came across a word, declension, and today we will try to deal with this question: why are the declensions in Latin? So, probably when we are introduced to certain Latin texts, we may come across sentences such as Regina servum laudat, that is, the queen praises the slave. Or to put it another way around, servus reginam laudat, or the slave praises the queen. And here you might see that the endings of the words are different. So if you observe the sentences properly, you will be able to find and locate the subject in the nominative case. In the first sentence, you see the subject is Regina, that is the queen, because the queen praises the slave. And then in the second sentence, the subject is servus, servus reginam laudat, the slave praises the queen. Let's come to the accusative. So in the first sentence, we see that servum is the accusative. And in the second sentence, reginam is in the accusative case. Now, probably you may wonder, how come each word looks a bit different in the accusative case? Well, we see that servum in the first sentence is in the accusative, and reginam in the second sentence is in the accusative. One ends with the other one ends with am. Why is this difference? Well, this difference comes because these words belong to different declensions. Now, declensions basically refer to the groupings of nouns based on common endings. In other words, we can either call them as groups of words or as a family of words. And you will notice that certain words belong to one particular family and there are others belong to a different ones. So let's take a look at some of the declensions. So first and foremost, you see that in the nominative, we have Regina and servus, whereas the accusative, reginam and servum. So if you look at the nominative, here you see that this ends with a, whereas here it ends with us. Similarly, reginam in the accusative, whereas it is servum in the accusative in the other sentence. So in this way, this is because they belong to different groups, as I've already said. So when it comes to declensions, there are basically three declensions which we will speak in the beginning. The other two we will deal much later. So here we see in the nominative, you would have Regina, servus, and canis. These are the words that belong to the first declension, second declension, and the third declension, respectively. Similarly, you also have other words. For example, femina belongs to the first declension, dominus belongs to the second declension, Leo belongs to the third declension. Similarly, villa belongs to the first, filius to the second, gladiator to the third. Now, if you look at the same words in the accusative case, we will see that there is a difference. In the first declension, you have reginam, servum, and in the third declension, you have canem. Similarly, you have feminam for the first declension, in the second declension, dominum, third declension, leonem. Similarly, villam belongs to the first declension, filium to the second declension, and gladiatorem to the third declension. Now, again, you will see that in the first declension, the accusative ends with am. In the second declension, it ends with and the third declension, it ends with m. So here you can see that by basically looking at the endings of these words, you can figure out to which declension or to which family do these words belong. And therefore, when you observe texts, when you read stuff in Latin, looking at the endings, you know the declension to which it belongs. And most importantly, you also know the case, because it is said a noun will be this only one in the declension. For example, words do not jump in declensions. Regina will be only in the first declension. You will not find Regina in the second declension, because nouns in Latin don't jump from one declension to another. However, it must be said that similar words in different declensions can be found even though they may be related to one another. Let's take an example of this. For example, filiam in the first declension refers to daughter, whereas filium in the second declension refers to son. So here we see that daughter belongs to the first declension, whereas son belongs to the second declension. Now, why is this difference? Well, this is because there are certain words in the first declension, most of them, which are in the feminine state, whereas in the second declension, you have majority of those which are masculine. About gender, we will discover and talk about it much later. But for now, let us answer the question, why are there declensions in Latin? First is to have a predictable pattern for words. Now, imagine if there were no declensions, you would have to remember endings for each words, which would have been quite complicated, and it would have been quite tough to remember particular ending for every type of word. It would have made learning Latin that more difficult. But now, since you know the declensions, if you know that a word belongs to the first declension, then you also will know that nominative will be in a, the accusative will be in am. And this gives you that amount of assurance that you have got the translation of it correct, because you know that nouns don't jump from one declension to another. Similarly, it helps us to figure out the case endings easier. Now, looking at the word, you know that the case ending is only the same in the first declension or in the second declension. And this way we see that you know that a particular word is in the accusative, nominative, or in the dative. As a result of it, figuring out the case becomes easier, and also understanding the context in which the sentence has been spoken. Next, it also creates a variety in language. Now, if there was only one kind of declension or one kind of particular rule in the language, it would have made the language boring. But since there are various declensions, it helps us to have a variety in the language. And in this way, different declensions give beauty and also give a lot more harmony to the language. Next, we also see that languages borrow words from other languages. And if there were no different declensions, you would also have to fit all those words together with the same declension, which would be quite tedious and quite difficult. And therefore, when you have different declensions, it becomes easier to sort these foreign words in different places. And also, declensions are there because they give more information than you think. Now, words in the first declension, such as femina, puella, filia, relate to the female, whereas those in the second declension, such as dominus, filius, servus, relate to men in the masculine form. So by having two different groups, you can separate different genders. Now, how declensions are constructed, they also add beauty and structure to the language. And therefore, if you take a closer look at the words in the first, second, and third declension, you will see that in the nominative, in the first declension, you will have the words ending with a. In the second declension, it will end with us. And In the third declension, it's not constant, it tends to vary. Whereas if you look at the accusative, in the first declension, an accusative will end with in the second declension, it will end with and in the third declension, it will end with m. And in this way, if you have figured out the different endings and to which declension they belong to, then you are well on course in your study of Latin. So this is all for this episode. In the next episode, we will deal and begin with the first declension in Latin. Thank you.